our video on? You want to do that again? No. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to tonight's special session. Tonight's special session is a discussion on legislation that is pending this year within the California legislature. And as you have heard over the discussions that we've had the past 2 years, there have been a lot of discussions and decisions that we have had to make because of items that have originated from our California legislature. So we thought it was a good idea to invite Seth Miller, our Regional Public Affairs Manager for California's League of Cities, to share with us some of the bills that he thinks is pertinent that may be discussed this calendar year. And Mr. Miller is with, as I mentioned, he represents the Peninsula Division, and we've had the opportunity to work with him last year as well as this on many local control issues, and has been a great advocate for local municipalities. And we want to welcome you to Los Gatos.
Well, thank you for having me. And I've been told that, I can run through this in 10 minutes, but this group does ask questions, which I encourage, so I look forward to a discussion. I do appreciate getting the opportunity to speak with local government folks doing the work on the ground floor, but I'm also here to encourage you to engage. I know Councilmember Rennie involved with the Cities Association. I see LAFCO representation. I think my message today is do your work locally, but the region and the western cities work feels more important than ever, and I'll get into the reasons why. But I feel like those pressures, you must be getting them in your commutes, in your housing discussions, and they're happening all over the state. So I'm here to give a little insight. The League thinks you can do both. You can protect local control and engage. Might even be more important to engage. So let me jump into it. And I can control my own clicker here. Okay. So yeah, we're going to run through our priority, the bills that are on the docket this year, quick division update, and then some questions. First and foremost, the League exists to protect local control and local revenue. We do it through coalitions. Sometimes our coalitions are with builders. Sometimes they're with labor. Sometimes they're with housing advocates. Your city's terrific at responding. I want to point out your town manager, I should say, submits letters when we oppose measures, when we want to promote measures. There's a couple transportation bills that you guys were right out in front on and really responsive, and we hear it time and time again from the assembly members, get your letters in, be visible, you make a difference. So that is our power source. It's our base. It's that we have cities all over the state, and we lean on you guys all the time. And in return, I think we're supposed to hit number 4 here is provide insights and information that you can use, cities and towns, to help influence legislation. So just to remember how we're organized, there are 16 divisions. The state is broken up into 16 divisions, and the Peninsula Division consists of 36 cities from San Francisco down to San Jose. The League Board has 4 general goals, and they determine them every year. I understand from your town staff there are questions around water and raising funds for wastewater and recycling water. I didn't prepare those bills today, but I certainly can share that information later. The emphasis of my presentation tonight is really going to go on the affordability and workforce housing bills that are on our docket. It also includes transportation because, as we know, they're linked. The 3rd and 4th bills are much more about things that have happened statewide. No matter how good you're doing locally, these are regional and statewide pressures that impact local jurisdictions. So especially I think of the Adult Use of Marijuana Act. It's not what I'm getting into today. It's not the topic, but whether your city has an ordinance in advance and is completely on top of it, drivers under the influence, people traveling from San Jose or San Francisco or Oakland, it's going to happen, and it's one of those things that a town council needs to be aware of. So it's stay local, but with a lens for something larger. Okay. Now, the tidal wave of bills is in again this year. There's 731 bills and 81 resolutions. We know that there's a huge unknown element in Washington, D.C. this year. talk of a 18 or 20 billion dollar hole in the budget if the ACA is actually pulled. The anecdotal position I want to share with you is that while the governor is fiscally very prudent, and we admire his work, and he's been a friend of the league more so than back in the days of redevelopment. He's reached out to us. He's made it really clear that he wants to spend no resources on housing and affordable housing, and it's an issue where it's pretty clear he's going to squeeze local jurisdictions, and we feel that loud and clear. There's little effort being put into funding and relief for local government, and it's a real pressure, different than even last year. More pressure and less openness to spending general fund budget. These are the transportation bills that you took positions on and supported our letters. It's moving along well. Passed out of committee. The revenue side of this is going to help local jurisdictions, both AB1 and SB1. The governor and others have set the date of April 6th to have a decision on both of these bills, which is really aggressive and encouraging. So I think we've done our part to move it along quickly, and we hope that moves fast. There are revenue sides to this that residents and maybe some of your constituents will be concerned about. In particular, there's a vehicle registration on zero-emissions vehicles. We all want zero-emission vehicles, and part of the benefit of having them was that you didn't pay your vehicle registration. The governor made it clear that he thought that those folks should also pay a vehicle registration fee because they're using the roads. But we think that this is a fair deal to address the backlog, and I'm sure you guys are well aware that we need to address transportation in a comprehensive way. So the main event that I want to get into with you tonight are housing bills, and I do want to leave time to discuss these. So the league has a package this year. We see it as, yes, there's revenue, and the two big revenue bills we're supporting are SB 3 by Senator Bell, which is a big bond measure for $3 billion, and Senator Atkins from San Diego, who has it's a recording fee on specific real estate documents, kind of a processing fee. So those are the revenue side, but this is the first year where the league has said, we acknowledge there's a housing crisis in many parts of the state and in many of the communities right where we are here in the peninsula. And we want to address the planning and front end of housing. And we've gotten together with Senator Roth to work on what we think is a thoughtful opportunity zone way of designating areas, doing all of the environmental review, doing all of the specific plan work up front, and designating resources, state resources to help cover city costs to do those planning processes. And in conjunction with the revenue side, the bond acts, we think it's a pretty good package. Now, this is the part I think we should get into some questions, but let me just give a little more context of the other housing bills that are out there right now. There are housing bills to reduce the voter threshold for housing infrastructure. There's housing bills out there to develop savings accounts for first-time home buyers, kind of smaller, less comprehensive measures. But there's always things that we got to be aware of that are really direct threats to us. This is Senator Wiener from San Francisco. This is the follow-up from last year's buy right housing proposal. This is the state's fairly heavy hand in saying, we're going to force you, we need you to build this stuff, and we don't really care what your local communities say. And it's an aggressive bill that we feel like is way out of line. But this is the first time they've drilled down and connected that RHNA process to transportation dollars. And it's the first time they've really drilled down in twisting our arm, local government arm, into also paying prevailing wage, so increasing the costs of the projects, increasing the requirements, and providing no revenue whatsoever. So it's a direct squeeze. The league sees it as a direct confrontation, and we're fighting hard to oppose it. The governor is behind it. and Senator Wiener, who's there were powerful forces also behind it. So this is a real one to keep our eyes on, and I suspect we'll talk about this in a few minutes. Let's switching topics. I know you guys, as a responsible city, are thinking about pension reform. And just wanted to give you the update. The League has a committee on this. It's called the Pension Task Force. It's a full committee, and they look at this issue. But the main thing that I gleaned, and I haven't been at these committee meetings, but I read the minutes, and it appeared that the Pension Task Force really just wanted to slow down the rate, the predicted CalPERS return on investment. So this idea that they were going to get 8.5% forever clearly changed last year. They received under 1% return on investment last year, which, as you well know, changes the obligations for every city and municipality involved. What happened, and the League feels pretty good about it, rather than a big drop from 7.5 straight down to 7, it's going to be in increments from 7.5 down to 7.375, down to 7.25. So it gives some more time. Cities told us that you need just more time to phase this in. So I'm glad to answer more questions on this, but we're meeting with CalPERS. My boss, Carolyn Coleman, realizes this is a huge, huge issue, so I want to spend a little time on it and can provide more details later, Laurel. So this land use bill is the one that's part of our package. It's complicated, right, because it's about housing element, and it gets into how it is we plan those areas and designate those areas. But for a municipality like yours that is very thoughtful, I think it's worth looking into what side, where those developments might go, what are the planning processes you'd want to do up front before it gets to a vote for council to be approved or disapproved. What are the preliminary planning processes that you can do? In contrast, there's a bill out there from Assemblymember Lowe, again, I think trying to address this housing crisis. I think he's a thoughtful person and a thoughtful legislator, but this one, it's a big hammer around housing element, and the League will oppose it, but what they're saying is your housing element law should be changed so that if you have RHNA projections saying your regional housing needs assessments, if those aren't actually built, and they're going to try to reconcile them, they don't care why, not that there was environmental review, not that it came across a delay. Nope. If you haven't built them, there's a punitive attorney general function in there where they can come after you and sue your municipality. So it's a very aggressive bill that I can't tell how much support there is for it or not, but it's really one to have on your radar, and because he's from our part of the world, just a heads up. So with that, I get to the fun stuff. The Peninsula Division tries to get you in council members networking and spending time with other council members from other jurisdictions. We hold quarterly meetings. We have a bocce tournament. There's a legislative action day that I would love as many folks from your community to come to. And then there's a League annual division and election where those of you on the council can, yes, take on more responsibility and join the executive committee of the Peninsula Division and help direct what our regional policy is moving forward. So that's my time, and I'd really love to have more of a discussion now.
Okay, thank you. And so for those in the audience that are here, what I'll do is I'll open it up for the council members to ask their questions, and then after council members have their questions, I'll open it up for public comments, similar to other meetings where we'll have 3 minutes, and then we'll summarize at the end and see what future action we may or may not want to be involved in. Okay? Vice Mayor Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 2 questions on Lowe's bill. So you used in capitals the word require. So the significance of that is currently we only have to plan for them and allow them to occur. Require means we need to build them ourselves. What does that mean?
It means there's a assessing, and I agree. It's confusing because the planning process is you're making a projection of where you think how many you may build, but the language in the bill indicates there'll be a reconciling with how many units were produced with how many RHNA projections there were, implying that if you didn't meet your projections, you will be on the hook for some, despite it being out of your control, and the league clearly thinks it's out of your control much of the time when projects are delayed. But the language in the bill indicates that there'll be a reconciling of your RHNA numbers with what was actually produced.
One more on this one. I thought I read somewhere, probably in a league email, that his bill was also, there was something about not being able to use old sites that were unused, and you had to come up with new sites even if you had unused sites. Is that part of his bill?
That's
and
part of this bill.
Where's the sense in that if we now got a site that's sitting there unused and we now need to maybe tear up good things and we still haven't used an open site?
I think your critiques are spot on, but the bill has cited communities that refer to RHNA projection zones, that sites that haven't been used in 10 or 15 years for various reasons, but continue to be put onto the RHNA projection list. That yes, these are sites that are prime for building, but they still haven't been built. They still stay on that list. This bill tries to reconcile again by saying what you're projecting you might build is now being evaluated, and with the Attorney General's at the helm making that evaluation, not you and your Planning Commission. So,
thank you.
Councilmember Jensen.
Sort of a related question. The Wiener bill that you put up and the Lowe bill, obviously one's going through the Senate, one's going through the Assembly. So if they are both successful, is there some reconciliation committee process to then come up with another bill, or does one take precedent? How does it work? I confess to not knowing how that process works.
Yeah, I mean, that is what they call making the sausage. And I don't have a concise answer for you, other than there are many bills that pass. We add additional bills and laws to our roll every year. Those bills are related, but I don't think usually that what happens is it'll move to a committee. So there's a housing committee, and there were housing hearings last week in San Francisco that David Chu was spearheading, and often they'll surface in committee, and that's the way it's structured. But no, I don't have a concise answer how those two particular bills will be reconciled. You
answered my question. It goes to committee.
Yeah.
Councilmember Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Sack. Mr. Miller, California has been scooting by on 50, 60-year-old infrastructure for things like water, dams, sewer lines, sewer treatment plants, power grids, school capacity. All these things are busted. We need $100 billion in state water improvements, and yet it seems as though all people care about is more affordable housing. How are we going to accommodate some of those other things? Are those ever discussed, or is it just let's give everyone a free house, come on in?
Well, I admire the visionary nature of your question and encourage you to raise that type of visionary perspective with your assembly, your elected officials, and your delegation. The cynical answer I have is that I think the advocates, labor unions, and the folks that are making the most noise are driving a lot of these bills this year. And so we don't seem to be looking 20 years down the road at all. We seem to be just looking for the next election or for what our stakeholders want. And that's my cynical non-league response, but that's how it seems.
Sounds like business as usual. Thank you.
Councilmember Spector and then Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Two questions. The first one also on housing. You've used the words, the legislation uses words like affordable. Under this proposed legislation, is the objective to really try and get affordable housing, i.e. smaller homes that people can afford, or is it the objective to build large developments where only a couple of the homes are small and affordable?
Again, terrific question. Sophisticated counsel here. My understanding is that we're making a lot of our housing units in the Peninsula region. We're actually hitting our production unit numbers or close for above market rates. So folks who can afford new condos and high end construction, we seem to be hitting that target. It's the really below market units that we're not building enough and there's a real shortage. So from the talk, as particularly when I go to housing committee hearings, the talk is that we need higher density units, and that they are not single-family units by and large. These are multifamily projects. The only way, based on the language that you hear at the housing hearings, we're not going to get there with single-family units. We're going to get there with higher density, multi-unit, multi-story. They're appearing to be more moderate now, but 4 to 6 unit seems to be a sweet spot for developers, but every community will have to determine that themselves. But that's my answer, is they're not after the single-family project. They're after multifamily, multi-unit, bigger projects to accommodate more low-income folks.
The multifamily unit in order to have the lower priced, smaller units. We don't know. Okay.
We don't know.
I will go to my question number 2. And that comes from a member of the community that we just received today. And what he's referencing is the Supreme Court will be hearing appellate court cases, has brought them up for consideration. And the appellate court cases gave the government more latitude in changing, modifying pension benefits.
Okay.
And so the question in this letter, and the question I have for you, is will the League of Cities be submitting an amicus brief to the Supreme Court in support of the appellate court decisions?
And Laurel just passed me the question that was posed. I don't have an answer whether the league's legal team will be filing amicus brief or not. It seems ripe for us to do so, and it seems like the type of thing that our legal team would like to do, but I don't have evidence that they have actually gotten to work on it. So if it's okay, let me follow up in the next day or two. It seems ripe for the type of thing that the league wants to do.
That'd be great. Thank you very much.
Vice Mayor, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Also on pension reform, looking at your slide on pension reform, I guess there's only one. This year was recently put on our finance committee, so I'm trying to learn finance, and we've been thinking about pension a lot. And when I look at our town budget going into the future, it doesn't look like our net income is going to grow. It looks like expenses continue to grow, maybe faster than our income. And so you were kind of implying the league is supporting this slow step from 7.5 down to 7. The way I'm looking at it, it's almost a disservice to those cities that may be in trouble, because if their finances are like ours, that look like they may get tighter in the future, they need to sooner get on this, right? If they've decided we're not going to make 7.5%, we're going to make 7 or less, then we're just diluting ourselves, and in the future we're going to owe more money. So by jumping it down faster, it immediately says you got to start paying more into it. And so where am I misthinking here?
There are cities that are closer to the breach than I think maybe you guys are. There are cities that if we pushed it to a full 0.5%, they would no longer make the obligations, and we've heard from them they would go insolvent.
So how are they going to make them in the future? Because it's just piling up more in the future.
You know, this isn't my area of expertise, but just anecdotally, the city of Stockton, they ramped up what contributions were for current employees, and through a combination of decreasing benefits and increasing contributions, they are going to skate by another 24 months. But it was close enough that a 0.5 percentage point was going to make a difference for them in being solvent and not solvent. So this is very serious business for a lot of cities, and maybe you get to look further down the road. But it's very serious, and the state. We suspect that the state's going to have to intervene at some point here with some form of financing and assistance, because too many municipalities have budgets that are spending 40-50% of their budget on obligations that were commitments made 15 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Miller, I have a question for you. You mentioned that the governor is hesitant to provide any housing dollars. Last year, there was $400 million that he held as an incentive for the buy right legislation. Do you know if that $400 million is still on the table, or is that no longer up for discussion?
That is no longer on the table.
It is no longer, regardless of how any of these bills move forward.
Correct.
Okay.
The governor's made it clear he's not contributing anything for housing or affordable housing for the state, and has reiterated that point a few times. Yeah.
More question, Vice Mayor. With Senate Bill 2, the Atkins one, the $75 recording fee, I know the Cities Association had just passed a letter of support, but their letter of support was conditional that $75 come back to the local municipalities in which it was recorded. Do you know if substantive comments like that, have you heard if that's something that the league would also support, or are these just comments that you're willing to take on right now and see how it goes through its process?
We love to get more specific comments that show an understanding of the issue, an understanding of an investment. That's the type of feedback that an assembly member would be thrilled to get, whether or not the jurisdiction that they're from would fit with that line of argument. I don't know.
Okay.
But that's exactly the type of detail that makes a difference often.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
great idea.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. So, following up on, I lost my train of thought. Hold on just a sec. What was the first question you asked? Oh, on affordable housing. So it actually says no general fund dollars, but it doesn't the governor support cap and trade dollars for affordable housing, if I remember correctly?
There is a pot in there under, I think he calls it the Sustainable Communities or the Strategic Growth Council. He's allocated money through an existing cap and trade program he has, and he's earmarked it. I agree it sounds somewhat contradictory, but for the governor, the pre-existing program, the Strategic Growth Council has sustainable communities. They've earmarked those towards very low-income communities already, so they've earmarked 40% of those funds for, I don't think there's maybe 2 communities in the entire Peninsula Division that even qualify. These are very much Southern California cities or Central Valley cities that qualify. So
if I summarize my understanding, then he is putting money from some source into affordable housing. It's just not going to benefit our area because of the nature of the cap and trade.
that would be accurate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, what I'll do is I'll open it up for public comment. And at this point, I have one card. I see more coming, but our first speaker will be Jack Veneta.
Good evening. Excuse me, Jack Veneta. I believe Councilwoman Spector covered this in the short form, but I'm reading this for Terry Duryea, and I'll give you the long form of essentially the same story. During this special study session, I asked the Town Council to explore with Mr. Miller the possibility of a league filing a friend of the court brief when the California Supreme Court addresses the appellate court rulings that state lawmakers may alter retirement benefits for current employees. If the court's ruling on the pending cases gives the governmental organizations greater flexibility to negotiate with employee unions, there is an opportunity for the town, as well as all of California governmental organizations, excuse me, to begin to address that level future retirement benefits are earned. Presumably, this will not impact current earned benefits, but it may be an opportunity to reduce the rate of growth of the town's obligations for future post-retirement benefits. Members of the Town Council recognize the town has a large unfunded liability pension and other post-retirement benefits. In a January 16, 2017 editorial by the Mercury News, the California Supreme Court stated that there is an opportunity to correct its mistakes and enable state leaders to rein in excessive public employee pension costs. Two appellate courts recently ruled that state lawmakers may alter retirement benefits for current employees. They said workers' pension rules may be changed during their careers so long as they receive reasonable benefits. That's a radical departure from decades of rulings suggesting pension benefits could not be reduced. Once granted higher accrual rates, workers were thought to be permanently entitled to them. Whether the Supreme Court agrees will profoundly affect California lawmakers' ability to slow the soaring retirement costs strangling state and local governments. It also might enable practical unions to negotiate changes for current employees depending upon how broad the decision is. The Supreme Court has said it will review that ruling and similar pending cases from Contra Costa, Alameda, and Merced counties. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Beneda? Okay. Jeff Lockridge?
Jeff Lockridge, 109 Paseo Laura. I hadn't actually anticipated talking tonight, but the subject was something that we've, as a town, have been dealing with and struggling with, affordable housing. I'm not so involved in the pension stuff right now, but the affordable housing issues are, they in our town, they come up once every 7 years. And then it's a struggle and a scurry to try to learn everything you can about it. And it seems that the information that has been presented makes it even more vital that our town, as our residents, get more involved in this process, because those are things that they have to vote on. And those are things that, I see that the bills that are going through, and I see the process that either you're supporting one or you're opposing another, and obviously the requirement ones are a little more opposition-based. My concern is that there doesn't seem to be any focus on the committees that cause all this. So MTC, ABAG, and the committees that have their responsibilities to create these kind of rules and regulations for California, and yet there's no oversight to them. There's no way for them to be voted out of office. There's no recourse for the citizens of of California to do anything about the process that we're seeing bills and how they're going to be enacted. But the numbers keep coming, and the numbers, they don't even have to explain how they come up with the numbers. And you said that there's punitive possibilities in the future. They already have punitive possibilities, and they're interjecting them with the RHNA numbers that they either that they're proposing for each of the towns. So anyway, my suggestion is that the town gets involved and supports this kind of an effort and starts educating the town, because they're going to have to vote on this, and usually they're not very. They usually wait until the last second, and they don't know anything about it. And it seems that we have a fairly long process of time. The housing element, we're right in the middle of it. It would be nice to be prepared so that people have some idea of thoughts of planning this whole thing out. So that's all.
Any questions, Mr. Lockridge? Thank you. Okay, seeing no other speakers, I'll close public comment, and then Councilmember Jensen. Do you have?
I was just going to ask Ms. Pervetti if perhaps she could say for the record the committee that she serves on with ABAG with respect to RHNA numbers.
Thank you. So I'm currently serving on, actually it's a subcommittee of the Cities Association that is exploring the possibility of Santa Clara forming its own subregion for RHNA purposes when we get started for the next cycle. And we've had 2 meetings so far. We're still in the, I would call, the forming stage, trying to determine whether or not the cities within our county are interested in being part of a subregion. I think from my experience doing multiple housing element cycles and participating on ABAG's housing methodology, I think this county is more ready than ever to actually be able to form a subregion and fairly distribute our housing need. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to move forward. And then ABAG really won't get started on this until early 2021 or so. So it's going to be a little while, which gives us more time to prepare and determine what our guiding principles are going to be as we move forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller, I do have a question, though, that prompted the question. Assuming any of these land use bills pass that have punitive action with regards to RHNA. Is it envisioned that this would be enacted with the next housing cycle? Has there been discussion to try and figure out implementation of this, or are we simply at the stage where these are the ideas being put forward, and as it goes further along, more details will go along with these words to let us have a better understanding of its effect on us?
Yes, I think and it fits in line with the question of what the committees do, and the Housing Committee would probably be after bills are passed. There's then another 6-9 months of what implementation looks like and how phase-in usually happens. So it wouldn't happen just as a result of the governor signing and agreeing to the bill. I'm thinking of the Wiener bill, for example. The stroke of the pen in June, or even if it's September, wouldn't mean it would be enacted right away. But our lobbyists think that 6-9 months afterwards, so by spring of next year, should these bills pass, maybe June of 2018 is what our lobbyists are telling us, there could be the potential for punitive action. It's getting our attention in a big way. It's very serious.
So then let me make sure that I understand. So it's because our housing cycle runs until 2023. So there is a possibility then that some of these punitive actions could occur with our current housing cycle, our current numbers that have been designed. Worst case scenario?
I'd want a worst case scenario. I'd want to verify with our housing lobbyist.
Okay.
Whether you'd be grandfathered in. But the phasing would happen quickly. It would.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm not sure if this is a question or maybe an idea that maybe you can comment on. So I've been thinking about how a RHNA subregion would work, and most cities don't want more housing. So, trying to talk another city into taking your housing, I'm having a lot of trouble with how that's going to work. But then when I start thinking about what's really the purpose of RHNA, it's to allocate housing close to jobs so we can reduce vehicle miles traveled. So and right now, it's really, they've been allocating some formula that something like, I know it's not exactly like, well, how many jobs do you have, and thus how many houses can what's your jobs to housing ratio, and you should take more houses. But when you've got little cities, that doesn't necessarily make sense. For example, if we sit as a small city with maybe we got more jobs than houses, so we might be told we need to get more houses. But we sit next to San Jose, which has a lot more houses than jobs. So if we start looking at what's close to us, we really wouldn't need to be allocated the jobs. If I start looking, well, most of the jobs are up in Mountain View, then it could be pushed up that way to meet the goal of reduced vehicle miles traveled. So then I guess my question is, would they consider factors like, distance from jobs, not just in your city, but, in the county as a whole, and maybe even throw in a factor of transit? How close are you to transit that can get them to the jobs?
Mm-hmm. So let me
question.
take that one. Yeah. So having sat on 2 methodology committees, these are exactly the types of debates that we have. What are the factors? What are the relative proportions? How much importance should we give to proximity to transit versus amount of current jobs or projected jobs? So all of that is debated in the methodology. What the subregion opportunity gives us is a chance to create our own methodology and our own factors. State law says we have to consider natural conditions and other things, which we would anyway because of our environmental constraints. But we also have to make sure that every city has some amount of housing. It is a fair distribution, a fair share distribution. But the other benefit of the ability to do subregion is that we're able to trade. So it may not be that we're trading off just housing unit for housing unit, but there may be a monetary exchange, there may be other types of exchanges that could occur, and we're just at the very beginning in terms of what might be negotiated between our cities as we go forward with a subregion. But first we have to just even see if our cities within our region are ready to even have these kinds of discussions.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, well, Mr. Miller, thank you so much for joining us. As you can see, there were several questions with regard to AB 1397, SB 35, and the pension reform. And in terms of just next steps, I know you do a fabulous job of keeping us updated, but if you could pay close attention to those and send any more information that you may have, that would be quite helpful. And the last question I have to you is, are there opportunities for people in the public that want to start to get engaged? Are they able to, get some of the updates that you provide on a regular basis to the legislators, or is that something that we should forward on to our own residents?
Well, first of all, I think we'll probably follow up with your town manager with the specific questions, which I'm
Okay.
thrilled to do. And the idea of getting more detail to you guys is exactly what I'm here to do. So that's my pleasure. But strategizing about how residents can get involved with thoughtful planning processes, that isn't something that I currently spend any energy doing. So, but I think you're very thoughtful in wanting to get ahead of the curve, to get your community aware, and your questions from the community are, let's get ahead of this on housing element and getting folks more engaged. I think that's a really smart place to be, particularly with the writing on the wall that the state and the region is putting more pressure to kind of force housing, and maybe the right type of housing would work, but you want to be in control of your own destiny. And the best way to be in control of it is to know a lot about the dates and the timing of when those processes happen. So I would be glad to work with you with stakeholders that are involved in that type of thing.
That would be great.
Yeah, that'd
would
be
be
my
great,
pleasure.
too.
But I don't have a canned answer for who to get involved with.
You know what? Then this is a question that we'll pose amongst ourselves then. But thank you.
Okay,
And so again, thank you for joining us, and thank you for the information.
my pleasure.
Okay, so this meeting is adjourned. We will take a 15-minute break until our public meeting starts at 7.